Have you noticed that the more you untangle your internal world, the heavier the outside world feels? You spent months, maybe years, doing the silent, unglamorous work of healing. You faced your history, redefined your boundaries, and quieted the noise of your old coping mechanisms. By all mainstream metrics, you are healthier. But then, a strange side effect kicked in. You go to a social gathering, a birthday party, a casual networking mixer, a family dinner, and within an hour, you feel a profound, bone-deep fatigue. It's not just the standard introvert burnout. It feels like a physical radiation sickness. You get into your car, turn off the radio, and sit in the absolute silence, feeling an intense wave of guilt. The voice of the collective whispers in your ear, asking if you are breaking again, if this is depression, or why you cannot just be normal and enjoy the company of people. Today, we are going to demystify this exact paralysis. We are going to look at why genuine psychological expansion doesn't make you a social butterfly. It makes you a selective sovereign. And more importantly, we will explore the precise tax this maturity demands from your current relationships and why Carl Jung believed that the final stage of becoming a true individual requires a willing walk into social exile. The mainstream self-help industry sold you a profound lie. They told you that the reward for healing would be seamless social harmony. They promised that if you cleared your blockages, you would step into rooms radiating magnetic, effortless warmth, instantly connecting with everyone you met. Carl Jung knew the opposite was true. He understood that development doesn't widen your social circle. It refines your vision. What you are currently labeling as social anxiety or regression is actually something far more formidable, and it is called perceptual literacy. Think of your mind like a radar system. Before you did the inner work, your radar was tuned strictly to the surface. When someone smiled, you saw happiness. When someone boasted, you saw confidence. You possessed the absolute luxury of taking the world at face value. But when you map your own interior, you accidentally learn how to map the interior of everyone else. Now, when you enter a room, you don't just see people. You see the hidden scaffolding of their psyches. You instantly spot the unhealed childhood wound driving the loudest talker in the room. You feel the microscopic spike of resentment, masked as a playful tease. You track the desperate thirst for validation underneath an act of casual generosity. You haven't become cynical or antisocial. You have simply lost the ability to be blind. And, in a society held together by a fragile agreement to stay asleep, the person who can see clearly can never truly relax. Relaxation in a crowd requires you to participate in the mutual fiction. And the moment you see the theater for what it is, your nervous system has to work twice as hard to pretend you're still watching a real story. To understand why this drains you physically, we have to look at what Jung called psychic assimilation. When you spend time with people who have never looked into their own dark corners, their unexamined shadow, their repressed anger, their jealousy, their existential panic doesn't just vanish into thin air. It radiates outward into the local environment like a heavy fog. If your perception is wide awake, your psyche acts like a sponge. Without your conscious permission, your nervous system begins working overtime to process and neutralize the emotional pollutants left behind by the people around you. You aren't just having a casual conversation. You are running an internal sewage treatment plant for the collective's unintegrated baggage. Let's look at a concrete example of how this plays out in everyday life. Imagine sitting at a beautifully lit rooftop lounge. The music is smooth, the drinks are flowing, and on paper, everything is absolutely perfect. But your body is vibrating with a strange, unspoken static. Across from you is a colleague performing the role of the ultra-successful mentor. But you can feel the rotting panic of his imposter syndrome, suffocating the entire table. To your left is a friend offering a compliment, but your skin crawls because you can register the subtle, competitive edge running through her words. You are the only person at that table refusing to get drunk on the performance. When you finally excuse yourself and step into the cool air of the street, you feel shattered. If you tried to explain this to a less aware friend, they would minimize your experience and tell you that it was just a fun night out and you are overthinking things. But you aren't overthinking. You are over-experiencing. The gap between what occurred on the surface and what you survived underneath is vast, and the energy required to bridge that gap is what leaves you emotionally bankrupt for days. This brings us to a harsh truth that few are willing to voice, which is that polite society is entirely dependent on a mutual agreement to ignore reality. The survival of the crowd relies on everyone agreeing to look at the mask rather than the face. The moment you step out of the matrix of your own unconsciousness, you violate the terms of service of the herd. The group doesn't actually want your authentic presence. They want your complicity. They need you to mirror their illusions back to them so they can continue to feel safe in their sleep. Have you ever been at a gathering where everyone was coddling someone's toxic behavior, and you decided to softly, calmly state a plain, undeniable truth? Remember how the air instantly left the room. The group didn't get angry because you were wrong. They got angry because you proved that participating in the illusion was optional. You broke the spell, and the herd rarely forgives a spell breaker. Jung wrote elegantly about this in his psychological works, noting that every meaningful stride toward conscious independence structurally separates the individual from the protective, unthinking warmth of the masses. He didn't view this separation as a tragedy. He viewed it as a non-negotiable law of nature. Right now, you might be standing at a terrifying crossroads, looking at your dark, quiet living room on a weekend night and wondering if you are actually growing or if you are just hiding. Let's run a clinical diagnostic to strip away your
hilarious.
guilt.
Where did you find him?
There are two completely distinct reasons a human being pulls
Aquí
away
está el
from the
mole que
world,
tanto les gusta.
and they look
Espero que lo
identical from the
disfruten mucho,
outside.
mis hijos.
The first is neurotic withdrawal. If you are withdrawing because you are terrified of being rejected, if you are using the lock on your door as a shield to avoid the risk of intimacy, or if the thought of being seen makes you feel small and bitter, that is a defense mechanism. It is your ego using isolation as a bunker to avoid the friction of life, and it requires gentle confrontation. But if you are pulling away because the ambient noise of superficial interactions threatens the clear, objective frequency of your new inner voice, that is, autonomous consolidation, your solitude is not a bunker. It is an incubator. You are staying home not because you cannot handle the world, but because you finally understand exactly what the noise is costing your soul. One movement is a collapse. The other is a coronation. Let us be completely honest about the journey ahead. This evolution will cost you real pieces of your life. When you stop wearing your old social masks, the relationships that were negotiated through those masks will naturally destabilize. They might call you cold, distant, or state that you have changed. They are completely right. You did change, and, unfortunately, they were deeply invested in the old arrangement, not the actual person hidden beneath it. This grief is unique because it is clean. There is no fight, no explosive argument. It is just the quiet realization that the bridge connecting you was anchored to a version of yourself that no longer exists, and trying to rebuild it would require you to dismantle your own wholeness. Paying this tax is the single most honorable thing you will ever do. To navigate this new landscape without drowning in cultural guilt, you must anchor yourself to the 4 laws of the sovereign soul. The first law is devotion over obligation. You do not owe your life force to an environment that requires you to play dumb to be accepted. Obligation is the chain of the herd. Devotion is the compass of the self. The second law is to completely relinquish the need to translate yourself. Stop trying to explain your depth to people who are perfectly content living on the surface. Speak with absolute precision, or let your silence be your statement. The third law is to guard your incubation. Treat your quiet hours not as an indulgence or a weekend luxury, but as vital psychic maintenance. The silence is the only space where your fragmented energy can coalesce back into a solid core. The fourth law is to rely entirely on your own gravity. Stop hunting for connection. When you become completely, comfortably anchored in your own stillness, you develop a distinct psychological density. The rare individuals who have paid the same price for their honesty will feel that gravity. They will find you, and when they do, you will experience what real connection feels like, not the frantic trading of social pleasantries, but the profound relief of being accurately seen by another awake mind. The quietness of your life is not a symptom of a malfunction. It is the soil of your next chapter. Stop apologizing for the empty room. You didn't end up here because you failed. You ended up here because you finally had the courage to outgrow the shallow waters. You bought this peace with your own tears, your own shadow work, and the courage to drop the mask. You earned the quiet, so let yourself live in it.